Well, shalom. My name is Todd Bennett, and this is the audio recording of the weekly Shema Yisrael newsletter titled Yom Kippur, The Way Beyond the Veil. Well, this was originally published on day 4 of month 7 on the Creator's calendar, also known as October 1st, 2022, on the Roman calendar. I hope that you all had a meaningful Yom Teruah, also known as the Day of Blasting. And if you missed the newsletter regarding Yom Teruah, it can be found on the Shema Yisrael website, or it's also posted on the YouTube channel in an audio format. I actually received photos of the renewed moon from all over the world, and I was happy for that because the weather in New York was actually very miserable, very cloudy, cold, rainy, wet. We couldn't see it, but I know people saw it all over the place, so that was great. I appreciate that feedback. Yom Teruah is called a day of remembrance, and those who follow Messiah Yeshua are privileged to remember his fulfillment of this appointed time when he was born on Yom Teruah 2,025 years ago. And those who follow the Jewish calendar celebrated their holiday on the wrong day this year and with the wrong focus. They celebrated on September 26th and 27th because they don't use the signs prescribed by the Torah. Instead, they follow a rabbinic calendar. Further, they carry the Babylonian tradition of celebrating the new year on day 1 of month 7. As a result, they refer to the first day of the 7th month as Rosh Hashanah, which literally means head of the year. And that's why they name their 7th month Tishri, because it comes from the Akkadian word that means the beginning. Yom Teruah is not the new year on Yahweh's calendar. There are only 2 times designated as New Year in the Scriptures. According to Exodus 12, 1 through 2, day 1 of month 1 was the beginning of the year for Yisrael. Also, the Jubilee year begins on day 10 of month 7. We read about that in Leviticus 25. And actually, the only time you read Rosh Hashanah is in the Scriptures when it's used to describe the Jubilee in Ezekiel 41. I encourage you to take a look at that because there's really a mystery there regarding the Jubilee cycle. Well, that's why we don't look to Judaism or follow the rabbinic calendar, since they prefer their oral Torah and ignore Yeshua in their celebrations. We understand that Yom Teruah was an important date for reckoning the kings of Judah, and while Judaism celebrates the Babylonian New Year, we honor King Messiah and remember his reign. We also remember that he is returning. Yom Teruah begins what is traditionally known as the 10 days of awe that lead up to Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur means the Day of Atonement. The first time we read about this day is a somewhat obscure reference in Exodus. It says, "And Aaron shall make atonement upon its horns once a year with the blood of the sin offering of atonement. Once a year he shall make atonement upon it throughout your generations. It is a most holy or set apart to Yahweh." It doesn't say what day this atonement will occur. The emphasis is on the fact that it is once a year and that is a most holy or set apart. Further, it's the high priest who's responsible for making atonement. Now, the primary commandment concerning the timing of this day is found in Leviticus 23 as follows. Beginning at verse 27, it says, "Also, the 10th day of this 7th month shall be the Day of Atonements. It shall be a set-apart rehearsal for you. You shall afflict your nefeshot in Hebrew. Et nefeshot is what we read. In English, you'll read souls. And offer an offering made by fire to Yahweh. And you shall do no work on that same day, for it is the Day of Atonements, to make atonement for you before Yahweh your Elohim. For any person who is not afflicted in soul on that same day shall be cut off from his people, and any person who does any work on that same day, that person I will destroy from among his people. And you shall do no manner of work. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings. It shall be to you a Sabbath of solemn rest, and you shall afflict your, et nefeshot, your et souls, On the 9th day of the month at evening, from evening to evening, you shall celebrate your Sabbath. And that's Leviticus 23, 27 through 32. The Hebrew word translated as atonement is kafar, and it literally means covering. According to this passage, the day is literally called Yom HaKippurim, the Day of Atonements. It's plural. So there's not just one atonement being made this day, but several. The passage goes on to specifically instruct people to afflict your souls on 2 occasions. Most interpret afflict your souls as a directive to fast. Now, we know that this is a highly significant day. Indeed, most consider it to be the holiest day of the year. But honestly, we should be regularly fasting in our spiritual walk. So fasting by itself does not really make this day particularly unique from others. It seems that there must be more than just fasting to set this day apart from other days. Well, the Hebrew word for fast is som, and we do not find it specifically associated with the command to afflict our souls. The word used to afflict, anatem our souls, nefshot, is actually more closely associated with humbling and debasing ourselves. And this process of afflicting can certainly include fasting, but it's not limited to fasting. As with many important commandments, this commandment to afflict your souls includes the untranslated aleph ta, pronounced et, affixed to the word souls, which is nefeshot. I talk about the significance of the untranslated aleph ta in most of my books, and it often points to the Messiah. So we should recognize that the Messiah is the focus of this affliction, which has a dual purpose of both a physical and spiritual humbling. As I previously mentioned, there's a connection between the spiritual and the physical, and this affliction requires a submission of our entire being. Now, the commandment in Leviticus 23 does not stand alone. In Leviticus 16, we read about a very elaborate ceremony established for this day as follows. It says, Now Yahweh spoke to Moses after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron, when they offered profane fire before Yahweh and died. And Yahweh said to Moses, Tell Aaron, your brother, not to come at just any time into the holy place inside the veil, before the mercy seat which is on the ark, lest he die. For I will appear in the cloud above the mercy seat. Thus Aaron shall come into the holy place with the blood of a young bull as a sin offering, and of a ram as a burnt offering. He shall put the holy linen tunic and linen trousers on his body. He shall be girded with a linen sash, and with the linen turban he shall be attired. These are holy garments. Therefore he shall wash his body in water and put them on. And he shall take away from the congregation, of the children of Israel 2 kids of the goats as a sin offering, and 1 ram as a burnt offering. Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house. He shall take the 2 goats and present them before Yahweh at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then Aaron shall cast lots for the 2 goats, 1 lot for Yahweh and the other lot for Azazel. And Aaron shall bring the goat of which Yahweh's lot fell, and offer it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel shall be presented alive before Yahweh, to make atonement upon it, and to let it go to Azazel in the wilderness. And Aaron shall bring the bull of the sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house, and shall kill the bull as the sin offering, which is for himself. Then he shall take a censer full of burning coals of fire from the altar before Yahweh, with his hands full of sweet incense beaten fine, and bring it inside the veil. And he shall put the incense on the fire before Yahweh, that the cloud of incense may cover the mercy seat that is on the testimony, lest he die. He shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the mercy seat on the east side. And before the mercy seat he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times. Then he shall kill the goat of the sin offering, which is for the people. Bring its blood inside the veil. Do with that blood as he did with the blood of the bull, and sprinkle it on the mercy seat and before the mercy seat. So he shall make atonement for the holy place because of the uncleanness of the children of Israel, and because of their transgressions, for all their sins, and so he shall do for the tabernacle of meeting, which remains among them in the midst of their uncleanness. There shall be no man in the tabernacle of meeting when he goes in to make atonement in the holy place, until he comes out, that he may make atonement for himself, for his household, and for all the assembly of Israel. And he shall go out to the altar that is before Yahweh, and make atonement for it, and shall take some of the blood of the bull and some of the blood of the goat, and put it on the horns of the altar all around. Then he shall sprinkle some of the blood on it with his finger 7 times, cleanse it and consecrate it from the uncleanness of the children of Israel. And when he has made an end of atoning for the holy place, the tabernacle of meeting, and the altar, he shall bring the live goat. Aaron shall lay both his hands on the head of the live goat, confess over it all the iniquities of the children of Israel, and all of their transgressions concerning all their sins, putting them on the head of the goat, and shall send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a suitable man. The goat shall bear on itself all their iniquities to an uninhabited land, and he shall release the goat in the wilderness. Then Aaron shall come into the tabernacle of meeting, shall take off the linen garments which he put on when he went into the holy place, and shall leave them there. And he shall wash his body with water in a holy place, put on his garments, come out and offer his burnt offering and the burnt offering of the people, and make atonement for himself and for the people. The fat of the sin offering he shall burn on the altar, and he who released the goat as the scapegoat shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and afterward he may come into the camp. The bull for the sin offering and the goat for the sin offering, whose blood was brought in to make atonement in the holy place, shall be carried outside the camp, and they shall burn in their fire their skins, their flesh, and their offal. Then he who burns them shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and afterward he may come into the camp. Well, in that passage we see 81 verbs directed toward the high priest, and we know that Yom Kippur is a no-work day for most all people, but an incredibly busy day for the high priest. The process of atonement focuses heavily on the high priest, likely because of Aaron's involvement with the sin of the golden calf, which involved the worship of Apis and Hathor. These were hybrid beings worshipped as gods by the Egyptians that harkened back to the Nephilim. Well, the high priest was responsible for performing the service required for all of the various atonements, which included a mysterious procedure involving 2 goats, a goat for Yahuwah and a goat for Azazel. Now, the reference to Azazel traces back to the previous attempt by the Nephilim to establish a world order. And while some were chained up and imprisoned, these fallen and meddling beings have yet to receive their final judgment. In fact, we're currently witnessing these same spiritual forces attempt to establish their new order of the ages. And it will be during a future Yom Kippur, hopefully not long off, that we'll see a final resolution and judgment of all sin, including the sin of the fallen sons of Elohim, represented by Azazel. According to the text of 1 Enoch, it says, "The whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin." Well, the process of atonement requires action by those seeking atonement as well as the mediator. Even though the bulk of the work falls on the mediator, we are supposed to be afflicting our beings if we want to receive atonement. In Leviticus 16, we also see the messianic Aleph Tah in the midst of the command to afflict your souls, pointing to the Messiah as that mediator, the high priest serving in the order of Melchizedek, who would himself be afflicted. Of course, the letter to the Hebrews details how Yeshua is that high priest in the order of Melchizedek, and I recommend you read that text prior to Yom Kippur, and you read it in Hebrews 5 through 7. Yom Kippur is the one day of the year that the high priest entered into the Holy of Holies, the most Kodesh place where atonement was consummated. He must pass through the veil that's covered by the cherubim. You shall make a veil. We read about this in Exodus 26. You shall make a veil woven of blue, purple, and scarlet thread, and fine woven linen. It shall be woven with an artistic design of cherubim. You shall hang it upon the 4 pillars of acacia wood, overlaid with gold. Their hooks shall be gold upon 4 sockets of silver, and you shall hang the veil from the clasps. Then you shall bring the ark of the testimony in there behind the veil. The veil shall be a divider for you between the holy place and the most holy. Well, this actually represented the entrance to Eden, which was paradise. You see, Yom Kippur actually began at the entrance of the garden. Remember when man was shut out of the garden after he sinned? We read about that in Genesis 3:24. It says he drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden he placed the cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. Well, Adam couldn't get back into Eden because he couldn't get past the cherubim. He deserved death, but instead he was covered with death. Now, I was celebrating Yom Teruah with some brethren last week, and we were talking about the condition of man prior to the fall. Now, I believe that if man was made in the image of Elohim, then he was originally a being of light. Obviously, he was made from dust, but there's some interesting theories about how blood has been slowed down, and it's worth looking into. But anyways, he sinned and tried to provide his own covering from the fruit tree. He used leaves from a fig tree in an attempt to cover his shame. Now, this gives us a hint as to when the fall occurred. The leaves of the fig tree could not provide a covering. Death and blood was required. Therefore, on Yom Kippur, he was covered by skin of a slaughtered animal. He was covered. While the man attempted to make his own covering, the scriptures record that Yahweh Elohim made tunics of skin and clothed them. So Yahweh must have slaughtered the animal, shed the blood, and prepared its hide. And that was the first instance of an atonement that we read about, since atonement literally means covering. The word for skin, spelled Ayin Vav Resh, is pronounced the same as the word for light, spelled Aleph Vav Resh. They're both pronounced or, which is why I believe that the skin covered the light. It appears to be a hint in the Hebrew text. And that's why Yeshua cursed the fig tree that represented Judah in Matthew 21:19. The religious leaders were attempting to provide their own means of atonement, as they continue to do this day. They were developing their own traditions and their own standard of righteousness that they thought would get them into the kingdom. But their religion did not bear fruit. They forgot they needed one like Moses, as we read about in Deuteronomy 18:18. They needed a mediator to descend with a renewed covenant to give them a second chance. They needed a high priest who could pass through the cherubim that were on the veil covering the Holy of Holies. Indeed, they needed a high priest who could approach the cherubim in the throne room in the Shamayim, because everything on earth was just a shadow of what was in the heavenly realm. So the message is loud and clear that there is no atonement without a high priest acting as mediator. Incredibly, the Pharisaic-derived religion of Judaism that historically rejected Yeshua as the king and high priest has been operating without a high priest for nearly 2,000 years. They have no hope of atonement through their good deeds, prayers, or any other solution offered by their rabbis. There's no special exemption for the Jewish people, as some modern evangelical teachers promote. They cannot bypass the Messiah through their oral Torah and their traditions. There's not enough soap to cleanse us from our sins in the eyes of Yahweh. Jeremiah said, "For though you wash yourself with lye and use much soap, yet your iniquity is marked before me, says Adonai Yahuwah." There's no path except the renewed covenant that was perfected through the very blood of the high priest himself. Now, for those who reject the high priest and his renewed covenant, Yom Kippur should be a time of trepidation, because the scriptures are clear what is required on this day. The truly wonderful news is that there is a high priest who has done the work. Here's how the passage in Leviticus 16 concludes, beginning at verse 29. It says, "This shall be a statute forever for you. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you shall afflict your et souls, your et nefeshot, and do no work at all, whether a native of your own country or a stranger who dwells among you. For on that day the priest shall make atonement for you to cleanse you, that you may be clean from all your sins before Yahweh. It is a Sabbath of solemn rest for you, and you shall afflict your souls. It is a statute forever, and the priest who is anointed and consecrated to minister as priest in his father's place shall make atonement and put on the linen clothes, the holy garments. Then he shall make atonement for the set-apart sanctuary, and he shall make atonement for the tabernacle of meeting and for the altar, and he shall make atonement for the priests and for all the people of the assembly. This shall be an everlasting statute for you, to make atonement for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year." Well, did you catch the one phrase? "For on that day the priest shall make atonement for you, to cleanse you, that you may be clean from all your sins before Yahweh." And now that is the very definition of grace. It's a free gift, a cleansing from all your sins. And we completely rely upon our high priest, Yeshua, for cleansing us from our sins. He did all the work. A couple of weeks ago, I demonstrated how Moses descended a third time from Mount Sinai with the second set of tablets on Yom Kippur, day 10 of month 7. That fact is confirmed by the words he spoke before going up. He said, "You've committed great sins, so now I will go up to Yahweh. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." Now that we know that Moses came down with a renewed covenant on a new set of tablets, but that renewed covenant was broken as well. So outside of the renewal performed by Yeshua, there should be an expectation of judgment. In fact, Yom Kippur is traditionally associated with the day when the scrolls are closed and the gates are shut. You can try to get in, but it's too late after that. And remember the story of the 5 foolish virgins who showed up late for the wedding? In Matthew 25, 10 through 13, it says, "And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward, the other virgins came also, saying, 'Master, Master, open to us.' But he answered, 'Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour.'" And this is a picture of those who missed the appointment. They weren't ready for the bridegroom, and they couldn't get in. That will be the condition of anyone who does not submit to the royal priesthood of King Yeshua. Now, Moses was from the tribe of Levi, and we see that the line of Aaron failed in that priesthood. We currently have people looking at this failed priesthood for a solution, as some are currently transporting red heifers that they believe will provide the ashes needed for waters of purification. Those efforts are both futile and offensive without a recognition of Yeshua as the high priest. Again, you can't subvert the work of Yeshua. You can't say, "Oh, we're going to go back and restart this whole process," when Yeshua already cursed it. Their efforts are an affront to Yahweh, since they ignore the work of the high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. Now, we read how the Messiah fulfills the required atonements in Isaiah 53 and Daniel 9, and I encourage you to read those texts. These passages allude to the fulfillment of Yom Kippur by the Messiah, who promised while he was dying, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." We also read in the text of Revelation, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. To the one who conquers, I will grant to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of Elohim." So the promise of paradise refers to a return to Eden. The Hebrew word Eden literally means paradise. The path back to Eden places us face to face with cherubim, just like what happened to Adam. So we need a high priest that can lead us past the veil, past the cherubim. And there's only one high priest qualified to get us through the veil, the one who shed his blood and caused the veil to tear after his death. And we read about that in Matthew 27, 50 through 51. It says, "And Yeshua cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked, and the rocks were split. When Yeshua died, the veil that contained the cherubim in front of the most holy place was torn. But it doesn't end there. Did you notice the mention that the rocks were split? Well, I was visiting with my friend Miles Jones a couple years ago, and he showed me a rendering from a Hebrew version of Matthew that provided even more specificity. That version indicated that the lintel to the doorway split and came down. And the lintel was the place where the blood of the lamb would be placed on a house. So the message was loud and clear. The way once blocked to all by the cherubim was now opened. But we need to be in the covenant renewed by the high priest with the pure blood. Now, I remember as a Christian how Yom Kippur seemed so distant and foreign because it was treated as strictly Jewish. Amazingly, those who follow Rabbinic Judaism are completely missing the fulfillment of this day. They follow a rabbi instead of the high priest who can lead them past the veil. So those who follow Yeshua are the only ones who can truly observe this day and see the continuing fulfillment, past, present, and future. Now, it's no coincidence, speaking of the future, that Yom Kippur also marks the beginning of the Jubilee year. And we read in Leviticus 25, 8 through 9. And you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years, and the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be to you 49 years. Then you shall cause the shofar of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the Day of Atonement, you shall make the Sabbath or the shofar to sound throughout all your land. Now read what happens in the Jubilee year. It says, and you shall consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout all the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a Jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family. That 50th year shall be a Jubilee to you. In it you shall neither sow nor reap what grows of its own accord, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine. For it is the Jubilee, it shall be holy to you, and you shall eat its produce from the field. And in this year of Jubilee, each of you shall return to his possession. So Yom Kippur is intimately tied to mankind's return to the garden, where we can partake of the tree of life. We know that the tree of life is located in the New Jerusalem, and that city with a high wall represents the enclosed space of the garden. The word garden actually means an enclosed or protected space. So we can see this renewed Jerusalem is essentially how the garden is going to be presented now. It says in Revelation 21, and he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from Elohim, having the glory of Elohim. Her light was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. Also she had a great and high wall with 12 gates and 12 messengers at the gates, and the names written on them, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. Text goes on to say, and he showed me a pure river of water, of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb. In the middle of the street and on either side of the river was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations, and there shall be no more curse, but the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. They shall see his face, and his name shall be on their foreheads. There shall be no night there. They need no lamp nor light of the sun, for Yahuwah Elohim gives them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. So the city contains 12 gates with the names of the 12 tribes of Israel on them, and those gates are guarded. And I would have to presume that they're guarded with a messenger with a sword. And notice that there is no gate of Christians. So you must be part of the assembly of Israel, joined in a covenant relationship with Yahuwah through a marriage covenant in order to get into this city. And the covenant with Israel was renewed by Yeshua and sealed with his blood. So There's a great wedding plan for all who are atoned by his blood and included within the marriage covenant. So those who desire to attend that wedding should be rehearsing these appointed times with purpose. Now recall how I commented on the precision of the Queen's funeral in the last message? While the Queen planned her funeral for decades, Yeshua has been planning his wedding for nearly 2,000 years. We can't imagine the precision and detail that will go into the future royal wedding of the Messiah. When Yeshua said he was going to prepare a place for us, he wasn't kidding, and it's sure going to be amazing. But first, we must continue to do our part and diligently rehearse. And that's why the appointed times are referred to as Mikra Kadosh, set apart rehearsals. We are rehearsing for the redemption and gathering of Israel, as well as the great wedding that follows. And just as Israel experienced liberty through the judgments upon Egypt, and then they were brought to Sinai to a wedding ceremony, we look to a future return and restoration during a planetary judgment that then will lead us to the wedding with Messiah. So that's the focus of a portion of the text of Revelation, which describes how Yeshua, as the king and priest, will be accomplishing judgment and deliverance at a future Jubilee. So when we read Revelation, we have to understand that's the context. It's within the context of these set-apart rehearsals through the appointed times. Yeshua is our eternal high priest, who's the promised mediator for those who are afflicting their beings and seeking atonement on Yom Kippur. And while he does all the atoning, we must be rehearsing and doing our part as well by afflicting our beings. Now, on Yom Kippur, we should not simply be focusing on a fast of the flesh, just as circumcision is a sign of the covenant, involves the circumcision of the flesh. It also involves the deeper, more penetrating circumcision of the heart. In Deuteronomy 36, we read, "And Yahweh, your Elohim, will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants, to love Yahweh, your Elohim, with all your heart and with all your soul, that you may live." And of course, that's the Shema. That's the greatest commandment according to Yeshua. Well, likewise, this critical day in the cycle of the appointed times transcends the flesh and should continue deeper to our innermost beings. In fact, I suggest that we heed the words from Isaiah for a true understanding of this day. It says, "Is it a fast that I have chosen, a day for a man to afflict his being? Is it to bow down his head like a bulrush, and to spread out sackcloth and ashes? Would you call this a fast and an acceptable day to Yahweh? Is this not the fast that I have chosen? To loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, that you break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring to your house the poor who are cast out? When you see the naked, that you would cover him, and not hide yourself from your own flesh? Then your light shall break forth like the morning. Your healing shall spring forth speedily, and your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of Yahweh shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and Yahweh will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, Here I am. And if you take away the yoke from your midst, the pointing of the finger and speaking of wickedness, if you extend your being to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted being, then your light shall dawn in the darkness, and your darkness shall be as the noonday. Yahweh will guide you continually and satisfy your soul in drought and strengthen your bones. You shall be like a watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters do not fail. Those from among you shall build the old waste places. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations, and you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in. So it's clear that the purpose of Yom Kippur goes far beyond simply refraining from eating or drinking. And isn't it interesting that the prophet demonstrates that when we get it, when we truly understand it, that our light shall break forth. In other words, we have this light within us that's being covered, atoned, kippur, by the flesh, and yet ultimately the goal is for that covering to come off, that covering of death that covers us, and that our light should actually break forth once again. So it's all about renewing and restoration, getting back to the garden in the way that man was created to be. And as we begin to shift our focus from our own affliction and look to the affliction and needs of others, Yahuwah steps in and brings us to a new level. He provides all of our needs as we work to rebuild his kingdom. All we need to do is follow the example of our high priest, Yeshua the Messiah. Now, many in the Hebrew roots and Torah movement seek guidance and even traditions regarding the appointed times. They desire to do it right, and sadly, they often look to Judaism. And as I've emphasized repeatedly, this is a grave mistake, since Judaism is a religion created by the Pharisees, the very ones who rejected Yeshua as the Messiah. At least most of them did. They then went on to Yavna and actually struck a deal with the Roman Empire after the destruction of the temple, and they created a headquarters at Yavna and created the Jewish religion, the religion called Judaism, or Rabbinic Judaism. And Judaism has developed traditions that do not acknowledge or recognize Yeshua as the high priest, the one who officiates over the day. As a result, they're not properly observing Yom Kippur, and they even keep it on the wrong day, as I mentioned. The prophetic timeline of the Messiah given by Gabriel to Daniel has long since passed, and Judaism has no prospects for a Messiah and no high priest. They do not even have an altar or a temple to fulfill the Torah commands, although they are presently seeking a revival of that service. Yeshua prophesied judgment on that system long ago. He prophesied that it would be torn down, and he would raise it up in 3 days through his resurrection. We read about that in John 2:19. He's the fulfillment of the temple system. Revelation 21:22 says, "But I saw no temple in it, for Yahuwah El Shaddai and the Lamb are its temple." He demonstrated through his birth, his walk, his death, and his resurrection that he was fulfilling the appointed times, including Yom Kippur. He also promises to return and accomplish a future fulfillment of these times. Therefore, without acknowledging Yeshua as the Messiah, you cannot properly keep and observe the appointed times. Without Yeshua, there is no atonement and no way back into the garden. As a result, those who follow Yeshua have a great hope on this typically somber day, while others do not. He renewed the covenant through his blood. He specifically stated that at the last Passover, "For this is my blood of the renewed covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins." His blood is what provides not only a covering, but a remission of sins. So this is not about good deeds. You cannot earn that through your own righteousness. As Isaiah said, "But we are all like an unclean thing, and all our righteousnesses are like filthy rags. We all fade as a leaf, and our iniquities like the wind." The solution to our dilemma requires much more than good deeds and fasting. It's with that understanding that we truly humble ourselves, knowing that there's nothing that we can do to save ourselves from certain judgment. We are completely dependent upon Yeshua for deliverance. So, rather than falling into Jewish traditions concerning Yom Kippur or just fasting, look to Yeshua as our high priest and our guide, and consider all that he did to provide atonement for us. And of course, we fast on this day, but we also humble ourselves with the assurance that we have a high priest who's coming to do more than cover our sins. If we submit to his authority, he knows us and will remember us on the day of judgment. He will completely wash away the sins of those who he remembers, those who are found ready with oil in their lamps. And only through his blood can we be covered and cleansed on the inside and the outside. Only through that covering and cleansing can we finally be restored to paradise and granted entry into the house that he has been preparing for us, the New Jerusalem. So shalom, and may you be sealed and your name be found in the Lamb's Book of Life. Barakot. My name is Todd Bennett from ShemaYisrael.net.